Right, back on the SportsMax zone, and we're with cricket. Although persistent rain ensured no play was possible on the fifth and final day of the historic 100th test between West Indies and India at Queen's Park Oval in Port of Spain, Trinidad and Tobago, the match ending in a draw. India taking the series 1-0. Days 3 and 4 were also impacted by the weather, but India had put themselves in a position to push for victory. Scores in the encounter: India 438 and 181 for 2 declared. West Indies 255 and 76 for 2. Joining us to dissect a somewhat anticlimactic end to the test matches, our very good friend Fazir Mohammed. Faz, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Not too bad at all, Ricardo.
Yeah, not too bad. It's a draw at the end of the day, saved by the weather maybe. But this test match, India had definitely put themselves in a good position to go on and win it on the final day. But rain stepping in and taking care of that. India, though, would be extremely disappointed because World Test Championship points on the line. And with this result, they would have missed out, one would think.
Absolutely. Very disappointed indeed. And it's interesting how the match turned because going into the fourth morning, most people might have been thinking grab draw anyway, with or without rain, because the West Indies were battling hard in the second innings. And then you saw that breakthrough from their seamers. It was a muggy, sort of humid morning, and that was the opportunity for Mohammad Siraj. 5 wickets, and then all of a sudden there's a 183-run first innings lead, and then in next to no time they belt 181 in 24 overs, and all of a sudden the Indians are in pole position to win the test match. So when you look at that situation, it tells you that this is what top teams are all about. They take advantage of these moments, and yes, they were thwarted by the elements on the final day, but that's what it's all about, to play the game in a mindset where you're always looking for that breakthrough, always looking for that opportunity to turn the knife, to go for the jugular, whatever phrase you want to use. But that is essentially what they did. But again, the weather had the final say.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, Faz, but you have been an advocate for baseball. When you watched the way the West Indies batted in that first innings and how slowly they went about things, how do you reconcile that, especially with what we're seeing from a team like England?
Just a correction, because one, I don't like the term baseball. I don't use it at all because I don't believe in these labels that the English usually use, and then they make it their own as if they were the only ones to ever play positive cricket in this way.
Wow, we've lost Faz
at
a critical time.
No,
I'm sure he'll be back.
Faz is always freezing when he's talking to me, and I don't understand.
That's a sign.
I think he freezes too when he's about to make some profound statements. and I'm sure we'll get him back soon.
He's back. Faz. Back
Faz
to
is
you.
back with us. Faz.
Yeah, the statement really isn't all that profound. It's basically saying that I don't believe in the labeling of baseball. I don't believe that the English should be credited with transforming the game, although their style is very positive, almost recklessly positive. But having said all of that, when you compare it with the West Indies, and I've heard people make the point about, why with the West Indies don't try it that way as well. First and foremost, you've got to be comfortable in your own game. First and foremost, you've got to be competent at this level of the game. And you have so many players in the West Indies team who are struggling to establish themselves in this format of the game that it's difficult to think that they'll take hell for leather and not worry if they get out and just play their shots. Because again, you have a West Indies team that is caught in two situations. Jermaine Blackwood is a classic case in point. 92 deliveries for 20 runs in the first innings. That's slower than dead slow. And then in the second innings, he bats more positively, plays a few good shots. Why is it so difficult for our contemporary players to find that happy medium? Forget about England and their baseball. Forget about being as slow, because surely there is a middle ground that says being positive when the need arises, being defensive when the need arises. That hasn't become extinct, but again, for the West Indies, because for so many of these players, it's about basically surviving to play the next match or the next series. This is what is happening.
Yeah, Faz, how much do you think coaching and captaincy, leadership overall, has to do with the approach? And I know you don't necessarily want to be utilizing England as example, but you have Brendan McCullum, you have Ben Stokes, who are aggressively minded players by nature. And then with the West Indies setup now, you have a Craig Brathwaite, who is a defensively minded player by nature. How much of that do you think rubs off on the approach from the overall team?
I think that's a very relevant point, Ricardo, because again, we forget the labels, but when you have a captain and a coach who tell you, look, if you fail, it doesn't matter. It's not going to jeopardize your place. We want you to play your game. Your game is to beat the cover off the ball from ball one. Your game is to run down the track and do what you feel you need to do. And if you can get that release from your coach, your captain, and they tell you, forget about the media, don't bother with what the media says about you. We back you all the way. That's a huge advantage to any player. Now, in the West Indies situation, we don't have that. But as you said, Craig Brathwaite, a very very, very phlegmatic sort of character. Of course, Andre Kohli settling into the job. So it's a difficult situation, a difficult challenge. But even if they want it to be, and let's try and let's theorize a little bit. Even if they want it to be, to say, look, let's abandon this defensive mode, and they were to try it and lose by a mile and a half, the criticism that would come down on the team, they would immediately revert to what they did before. And again, that speaks to another issue which we may not have time for. Because, again, England can do it because they play 5-test series, they play 4-test series. They occasionally, against the minnows like us, might play 2 or 3-test series. But for the West Indies, for example, let's say they want to go positive from now on. When is the next series? January of next year. And it's a series of just 2 matches. How do you get young players like a Kirk McKenzie or Alec Athanas to enjoy that sense of confidence and self-belief that they could take that to Australia in January? It's well nigh impossible because they don't have the opportunities to grow their game at the highest level to feel as confident as the England players are feeling.
Right, Faz, and that major gap, of course, from now till January will affect these youngsters. And speaking about gap, I saw a massive gap in their fielding, sloppy fielding. Let's talk about those drop catches that the West Indies had. That, of course, allowed Rohit Sharma to bat on.
And those drop catches are nothing new, Mariah. We've seen it time after time. We saw it ad nauseum in the World Cup qualifiers, which are an absolute disaster, of course. And again, it begs the question as to the mindset of our players, the environment that they're in. Not about making excuses, it's about owning up to the realities. Why is it that players who we've seen very, very competent, very, very efficient, very comfortable in the early stages of their careers are suddenly making mistakes all over the place? Is it that the West Indies cricket environment, and I think Lance alluded to it in an earlier discussion a couple of weeks ago, where Brian Lara made the point that when you come into the West Indies team setup, progress stops. Rather than that being the point, where your game advances and flourishes and develops different characteristics and you're able to adapt to meet different conditions and different bowlers and different countries and different pitches, you almost flatline. And the question has to be why? Why is that continuing to happen? And you must feel sorry for a lot of our talented young players. Bradford mentioned these two, Athanas and McKenzie, now as being the future. But what future do they really have if the West Indies are playing so little test cricket and are not really preparing themselves properly for whatever little test cricket that they're playing?
Yeah, fans couldn't have said it better, and I'm in no way advocating for the almost reckless approach that we or seemingly reckless approach that we see from England at times, but I just believe that given the way we have played our cricket over time, and usually we bring in a lot of attacking-minded players into our test setup, and then they fall back into this defensive approach, which I don't think is helping them. I think it's important that we find a way to have them play more to their strengths. But we have to end it there, Faz. You are staying with us, though, because we have some Ashes cricket to talk about. But after the break, Mariah Ramarak will have Zone Update too.